echo chamber. The ferry bobbed gently as it approached the small wooden dock of Teluk Bayangan. Eduard Mitchell gripped the railing, scanning the shoreline for Laras. 6 months of late-night video calls hadn't prepared him for the overwhelming greenery that seemed to swallow the village whole, leaving only glimpses of weathered structures peeking through the dense foliage. The humidity carried unfamiliar scents, rotting vegetation, spices, and something else he couldn't identify. First time in Indonesia? A man beside him smiled, camera hanging from his neck. That obvious, huh? Eduard laughed nervously, running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. I'm Wei Chen, photographer. He extended his hand. The beaten tourist path ended 3 islands ago. Not many make it this far. Before Eduard could respond, he spotted her, Laras, waving from the dock, her red dress bright against the muted browns and greens of the village. His heart raced. She looked just like her profile picture, a small miracle in the world of online relationships. Their eyes met across the narrowing gap of water, and he felt a strange tugging sensation in his chest, like an invisible thread pulling him toward shore. The humidity hit Eduard like a wet blanket as he disembarked, his shirt immediately clinging to his back. Laras embraced him, the scent of unfamiliar spices and flowers enveloping him. He breathed her in, noting how different she smelled from their video calls. More earthy, more real. "Welcome to Teluk Bayangan," she said, her voice melodic, yet somehow different from their calls, more confident, with a subtle accent he hadn't noticed before. "I am so happy you finally came. The journey must have been exhausting." Eduard shook his head, still drinking in the sight of her. Worth every minute. The village was smaller than Eduard had imagined. Maybe 30 structures arranged in a crescent around a central clearing. Villagers paused their activities to watch him pass, their expressions unreadable but intense. Children whispered behind cupped hands, and an elderly woman made a subtle gesture when she thought he wasn't looking, fingers forming a pattern that reminded him of the ward-off evil sign his superstitious grandmother used to make. "Everyone's staring," Eduard whispered. Laras squeezed his hand. "We rarely have visitors. They are curious, that's all. You bring news from outside, new energy." His guest house sat at the village edge, a 2-room structure on stilts with weathered wood that creaked with each step. Inside, a simple bed draped with mosquito netting and a small bathroom with a bucket shower awaited him. The windows had no glass, only wooden shutters that let in the jungle sounds when open. "It's not the hotel experience," Laras said apologetically. "We have no electricity except from generators, and those run only a few hours each day." "It's perfect," Eduard assured her, though the isolation suddenly felt more real than romantic. He'd left behind a neatly ordered apartment in Chicago, a predictable job as a night security guard, and the familiar glow of screens that had connected him to Laras. Now, unfiltered reality surrounded him, chaotic and unpredictable. After unpacking his few belongings, Laras took him to her uncle's house for dinner. Pak Surono was the village elder, a man of indeterminate age, with intelligent eyes that seemed to evaluate Eduard with every glance. The food was delicious, rice with spicy vegetables, grilled fish, and fruits Eduard had never seen before. But conversation felt strained. Pak Surono asked pointed questions about Eduard's family, his work, his health history. When Eduard asked about the village's history, the old man exchanged glances with Laras before launching into what felt like a rehearsed story about Dutch colonizers and local resistance. That night, after escorting him back to the guest house, Laras kissed him gently. "Rest now. The island accepts newcomers slowly. Give it time to know you." Alone in his room, Eduard lay awake, listening. The jungle sounds formed a strange concert that seemed to pulse with the darkness. A whisper drifted through his window, so faint he thought he'd imagined it. Then another. The words unintelligible, but the tone unmistakably human. He sat up. "Hello?" His voice echoed back oddly, as if the room were much larger than it appeared. The whispers ceased immediately. Sleep came eventually, but with it, dreams of shadowy figures watching from the jungle's edge. In one vivid sequence, Laras stood in his room, whispering words he couldn't understand while tracing symbols in the air above his body. Her eyes were different, bottomless pools of darkness that reflected no light. When he tried to move, he found himself paralyzed, able only to watch as something seemed to seep from her fingertips. Dark tendrils that probed at his ears, nostrils, the corners of his eyes. He woke gasping, sheets soaked with sweat despite the cool night air. The dream had felt so real that he checked his body for marks before finally falling back into restless sleep. Morning brought relief, and the realization that his phone showed only one bar of service. A text to his mother. Arrived safely, took 3 attempts to send. As he waited for the 3rd attempt to process, he noticed the timestamp on his last message to Laras, sent supposedly 2 days before his arrival. "The island sounds amazing. I feel like it's calling to me." He had no memory of sending it. Laras arrived with breakfast, rice, eggs, and a sweet tea that tasted of cloves and something else he couldn't identify, leaving a slight numbness on his tongue. The tea reminded him of the medicine his dentist had once prescribed, the way it made his mouth feel simultaneously present and distant. "Did you sleep well?" she asked, studying his face intently, her eyes normal in the morning light. "Strange dreams," Eduard admitted, "and I think I heard people whispering outside my window." Something flickered across her face. Concern. Fear. But it vanished quickly. The jungle plays tricks on visitors. The wind through bamboo can sound like whispers, and dreams are often vivid in new places, your brain processing unfamiliar stimuli. Eduard nodded, though there had been no wind last night. He sipped the tea, feeling the numbness spread across his tongue, wondering why he didn't just set the cup aside. Later, as Laras showed him around the village, he noticed symbols carved into door frames, intricate patterns reminiscent of those from his dream. When he pointed to one, Laras explained, "Protection symbols. Very old tradition. They keep harmony between the villagers and the island." "The island? You talk about it like it's alive." Laras smiled enigmatically. "All places have spirits, Eduard. Your cities too, though people have forgotten how to listen." At the village center, Eduard met Wei Chen again, photographing an ancient stone structure partially reclaimed by vines. The stones formed a circle with a flat altar-like slab at its center. Symbols similar to those on the doorframes were etched into the standing stones. "Getting the full cultural experience?" Wei asked, his friendly demeanor from the ferry now undercut with tension. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his camera lens. "Trying to? Have you been here long?" "A week. Fascinating place. The acoustics are..." Wei paused, glancing at Laras, who had drifted within earshot. "Unique, especially at night." That evening, the villagers gathered for what Laras called a welcome ceremony. Drums beat a hypnotic rhythm as dancers moved around a fire built in the stone circle. Eduard noticed Wei sitting across from him, looking pale despite the heat. The photographer's eyes kept darting to the shadows beyond the firelight, as if tracking movement invisible to others. During a lull in the ceremony, Eduard approached him. "You okay? You look sick." Wei's eyes darted nervously. "Have you noticed how sounds echo here? Not just echo. They repeat things you never said." He lowered his voice. "And the symbols on the door frames, they move. Not all at once, but a little each day. I've been photographing them. Each morning they're different." Eduard frowned. "Maybe the carving is playing tricks with the light." "No." Wei gripped Eduard's arm, his fingers digging in with surprising strength. "Something's wrong here. I've been having dreams about being hollow, about something wanting to crawl inside me, and the tea." "Wei!" Paxurano appeared beside them, his weathered face creased in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You should be resting if you feel unwell. The island demands respect from visitors. Laras, perhaps you could take Eduard back to the ceremony. The dancers are about to perform the traditional blessing." As Laras led him away, Eduard glanced back to see Paxurano speaking intensely to Wei, one hand gripping the younger man's shoulder. Wei looked defeated, nodding mechanically to whatever the elder was saying. That night, the whispers returned, louder. Eduard crept to his window but saw only darkness. His phone lit up with a message notification from himself to Laras, sent 3 weeks ago. "Can't wait to feel the island's energy you described. It's like I can already sense it reaching for me." He had no memory of sending it. Sleep eluded him until dawn, when exhaustion finally pulled him under. He dreamed of shadows peeling off the walls, flowing like liquid around his body, probing his ears and mouth, seeking entrance. In the dream, his skin became permeable, his boundaries dissolving as darkness seeped into him. It wasn't painful. Instead, it felt like a terrible relief, like finally scratching an itch that had always been just out of reach. The next 3 days followed a disturbing pattern. By day, Laras showed him the island, ancient ruins in the jungle, a waterfall where the water seemed to fall in slow motion, a cave where their voices echoed back, saying slightly different words than they had spoken. "This place is beautiful," Eduard said in the cave, his voice bouncing off damp stone. "This place is watching," came the echo, though he was certain those weren't his words. Laras pretended not to notice, quickly guiding him out into the sunlight. "Some places have stronger energy than others," she explained vaguely. "That cave is especially potent." At night, the whispers grew louder, his dreams more vivid. Twice he woke to find his door open, though he distinctly remembered latching it. The symbols on his doorframe had definitely changed, the curves now sharper, the lines forming a pattern that seemed to draw his gaze and hold it until his vision blurred. He began to notice other oddities too. Time seemed to stretch and contract unpredictably. His watch would show hours passing in what felt like minutes, or minutes crawling by like hours. The villagers sometimes spoke among themselves in a language Laras claimed was a local dialect, but which sounded like no human language Eduard had ever heard, all sibilant sounds and impossible consonants. Most disturbing was his growing attraction to the stone circle. He found himself drawn to it repeatedly, making excuses to pass by it, feeling an inexplicable comfort when standing in its center. Sometimes he thought he could hear it humming, a deep vibration just below the threshold of conscious hearing. On the 4th day, Eduard found a leather-bound journal wedged behind his bed's headboard. The faded handwriting described experiences disturbingly similar to his own. Whispers, dreams, symbols, time distortions. The writer, a British anthropologist named Thomas Mercer, had come to study the village's unique customs. His entries grew increasingly disjointed, describing a presence that watches from behind every villager's eyes and speaks through their mouths while they sleep. The final entry, dated 1997, read only, "They need a vessel. God help me. I hear it in my thoughts now." When he confronted Wei about the journal, the photographer looked confused. "What journal? I never gave you anything." "You just handed it to me an hour ago. You said you found it in your room." Way backed away. I haven't seen you since yesterday. You're confused, man. The island, it gets into your head. Eduard noticed then that Wei looked healthier than before. His skin had more color, his hands no longer trembled, but his eyes seemed different, duller somehow, as if a light had been switched off behind them. That night, Eduard watched Laras prepare his evening tea. When she stepped outside to speak with a villager, he switched his cup with hers. After drinking, Laras became increasingly drowsy, eventually excusing herself early. Instead of sleeping, Eduard searched her bag, finding small packets of herbs labeled in Indonesian and a notebook filled with what appeared to be ritual instructions. Drawings of the symbols from his doorframe filled several pages, alongside anatomical sketches of a human head with something flowing into it. Notes in Laras's handwriting described preparation of the vessel and signs of acceptance. His name appeared several times, always with question marks, while Wei's name was circled and underlined. On another page, a family tree showed Laras's lineage, stretching back centuries. Beside each generation, a name was marked with a small star. At the bottom, Eduard found a note. Vessel keepers, 1 per generation must find and prepare. Laras's name bore the star in her generation. When Laras returned the next morning, Eduard pretended everything was normal, though his hands trembled as he accepted the tea but only pretended to drink it. He noticed a slight thickness to her movements, a delay between thought and action that hadn't been there before. "I found an old journal last night," he said casually. "Something about vessels." Laras froze. "Where? Does it matter? What's happening here, Laras? What are you people doing to me? To Wei?" Her shoulders slumped. "It's not what you think. Really. Because I think you've been drugging me. I think this whole thing, us meeting online, you inviting me here, was a setup." Tears welled in her eyes. "Yes and no. Yes, I was assigned to find someone suitable. But what happened between us, that was real. I didn't expect to care for you." "Suitable for what?" She looked toward the jungle. "The island has an inhabitant, ancient, before humans settled here. It requires a vessel every generation. Without one, it would break free completely." Eduard laughed bitterly. "You're telling me there's some kind of demon here, and you brought me as, what, a sacrifice?" "Not a sacrifice, a vessel. And not you, Wei. He was chosen. You were." She hesitated. "Back up," Eduard finished, "in case Wei didn't work out." Laras didn't deny it. "The Whisperer has to be contained. My ancestors made a pact centuries ago. One vessel freely given or carefully prepared keeps it bound to the island. Without that, it would spread, growing stronger with each mind it touches." She reached for his hand. "I was sent to find candidates, that's true. But I chose to love you. That part was my choice." Eduard pulled away. "And the tea? The drugging? Preparation? The vessel must be receptive, open. The herbs thin the boundary between self and other. They aren't harmful. They're sacred." She wiped away tears. "Wei is nearly ready. Tonight is the binding ceremony. You can leave tomorrow. I'll take you to the mainland myself." But Eduard saw the lie in her eyes. There would be no tomorrow, no departure. Once the entity was bound, there would be no witnesses left. That night, unable to sleep and unwilling to drink the tea, Eduard decided to escape. He packed quickly and slipped out, heading for the dock. The jungle path, clear during the day, now seemed to shift and wind differently. After an hour, disoriented and certain he was walking in circles, he emerged not at the dock, but back at the village edge. A procession of villagers moved through the central clearing, torches illuminating their solemn faces. In their midst, Wei Chen walked stiffly, eyes vacant, a beatific smile fixed on his face. Pak Surono led him toward the ancient stone circle. Eduard hid in the shadows, watching as they arranged Wei in the center of a circle of symbols drawn on the ground. The villagers began to chant, their voices rising and falling in perfect unison. The air above Wei began to shimmer, darkness pooling like oil, thickening until it formed a churning column of shadow that extended from the ground to the night sky. Something was wrong. Wei began to convulse, foam speckling his lips. The darkness probed at him, tendrils extending toward his eyes, mouth and ears, but then recoiling. Pak Surono shouted instructions, his calm demeanor cracking. The darkness retreated, then surged again, probing Wei before withdrawing completely. "It rejects him," Pak Surono's voice carried clearly. "The Whisperer finds him unsuitable." The darkness hung suspended, then rotated slowly, like a predator sensing new prey. It stretched toward the shadows where Eduard hid. He ran. Back in his guest house, Eduard barricaded the door with the bed. His hands shook as he tried to call for help, but his phone showed no service. A reflection in the window caught his eye. Not his own face, but something darker, grinning with teeth too numerous and sharp to be human. The door splintered as villagers broke through. Laras pushed to the front, face streaked with tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It has chosen you now. It's already begun. I can see it in your eyes." Eduard felt it then, a presence in his mind like an echo of his own thoughts, growing stronger. Memories that weren't his filled his head. Centuries of watching from the jungle, of whispering to villagers, of brief, glorious periods of freedom in a human vessel. "No," he gasped, but his voice echoed strangely in his own ears, as if coming from far away or long ago. They brought him to the stone structure. The ritual began anew, but this time the darkness descended eagerly. Eduard felt it seep into him through his eyes, ears, mouth, every pore. His consciousness fractured, splintering into echoes that bounced and rebounded inside his skull. The entity's thoughts overwhelmed him, ancient, alien perspectives that made his human concerns seem trivial. It had been old when the first humans arrived on the island, had watched civilizations rise and fall, had tasted thousands of minds. It didn't hate humanity. It simply regarded them as necessary, like a parasite needs its host. Laras held his hands, weeping, as something else rose within him, pushing him aside in his own body. The last thing he saw with truly his own eyes was her face, mouthing words he could no longer hear. "I'm sorry. I love you. I'm sorry." Then darkness. Eduard woke to his alarm clock's familiar buzz. His apartment in Chicago looked exactly as he'd left it months ago. Had it all been a dream? The Indonesian island, Laras, the entity, all some elaborate nightmare? He shuffled to the bathroom, splashing water on his face before looking in the mirror. He looked the same, perhaps a bit thinner, with new lines around his eyes that spoke of experiences he couldn't quite remember. But subtle wrongness surrounded him. The alarm's buzz echoed slightly longer than it should. His shadow on the wall moved a fraction of a second slower than he did. And sometimes, catching his reflection unexpectedly, he glimpsed something else looking back at him. Something ancient and patient. He returned to work at the security firm, monitoring empty hallways at night. His co-workers commented on how different he seemed since his vacation. More confident, more focused, somehow older. "Indonesia changed you, man," his supervisor said with a laugh. "You should take more trips." "I'm planning to," Eduard replied, his smile revealing nothing. At night, he found himself on language exchange forums, talking to lonely people in distant countries. A college student in Brazil, a nurse in South Africa, a teacher in Canada, each conversation the same. His sympathy for their isolation, his descriptions of a beautiful island he knew, his suggestion that perhaps one day they might visit. With each conversation, he felt the entity's satisfaction, like a predator scenting prey. He developed new habits. He avoided direct sunlight, finding it painful. He could go days without food, but craved certain spices that matched those in Laras's tea. Sometimes he woke to find himself tracing symbols on his apartment walls, designs that faded by morning, but left a faint residue visible only from certain angles. In his dreams, he returned to Teluk Bayangan, saw all his new friends arriving at the wooden dock, where Lara still waited in her red dress. Behind her stood villagers, their faces solemn with duty and sorrow. And behind them all, his true self, the real Eduard Mitchell, watched helplessly from a prison made of echoes, screaming warnings that emerged from his mouth as warm invitations. Each time he tried to sabotage the entity's plans, his resistance grew weaker, the memory of who he had been fading like writing in sand. Sometimes, in rare moments of clarity between the entity's thoughts, Eduard understood the truth. He had never left the island. His body still sat in that stone circle maintained by the villagers, while the entity used his mind, his memories, his voice to lure new potential vessels. The apartment, his job, the online conversations, all were projections created by the entity, using Eduard's memories to craft convincing simulations. The real world existed only in brief glimpses when the entity's concentration faltered, revealing the stone circle, the jungle, Laras's aged face as she tended to his physical form. His consciousness, the essence of who he was, now existed only as an echo in the chamber of his own mind, experienced over and over, but changing slightly with each repetition, until one day, nothing of the original would remain. Just whispers in shadow, just echoes. Thanks for experiencing my story. If you enjoyed this tale, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. The Whisperer really feeds on engagement metrics, and remember to check out our other videos. We have so many visitors, ready to share their experiences. Don't forget to hit that bell notification. The echoes are always listening. Help me.